Hey everyone, and welcome to a special online interview on Indie Corner. With me today, I have Yanni from Fuzzy Wuzzy Games, as well as Shawn Long joining us from Nintendo Enthusiasts. How are you guys doing today?
Hey guys, it's good to be here. We're doing just great over here in Vancouver.
Doing good in North Carolina.
All right, so Yanni, obviously, you guys have just released a game, Armillo, on the Wii U eShop. Can you give us a little bit of a highlight of what Armillo is all about?
Sure, Armillo's a 3D puzzle platformer. At its core, it's basically a platformer with a whole lot of mechanics. Kind of like, think of it like an obstacle course. We borrow some ideas from other games like Sonic and Mario Galaxy, but I think what sets us apart is in the way that we kind of make our own sauce, like we got the ingredients that are ingredients you've seen before, like, tomatoes and maybe some herbs and stuff, but the way that we kind of put it together in the experience, I think, is what sets Armillo apart from other platformers.
All right, and now Armillo came out on the Wii U eShop exclusively. Is there a reason why you chose the Wii U as your first console to release on? Why not simultaneously release on Steam?
The thing with doing multi-platform launches is they take an incredible amount of effort. As you guys probably already know with Armillo, it's a 3D platformer, and there's not a lot of those out there. And the reason for that is because they take a lot more effort to do than a 2D side-scrolling platformer. Not that there's anything wrong with those, but it's just the sheer volume of assets that you need to do for 3D is way more. So the only hope that we had of actually releasing anything that would be decent would be to really focus our energies on one platform, try to get that right, or at least as right as we could with a small team of two, basically 2.5 people, and then just do our best job at releasing in one platform. The reason we did the Wii U is because originally we used to be on Xbox XBLA, and through this sort of cert process with Microsoft, it kind of sort of became obvious that that probably wasn't the best platform for us, and Microsoft was not really interested. So we kind of sat around and thought about, well, what would be our ideal console to release on? And the Wii U came up a couple times, and basically, I think, to answer your question why we picked that is, I think it's the best fit for the game. Like Armillo to me is very much a console type platformer in the genre of the Marios and the Sonics of the world, and I think it really sits nicely on that platform, and to boot, I think most of the users would be immediately familiar with this kind of game.
Now, I know you're talking about how you borrowed some basic ideas from Sonic and Mario, but one of the ideas I kind of see Armillo borrowing is the whole mascot thing, which, Sonic and Mario was very common, and during the 90s you had everyone trying to do a mascot with, Bubsy, Sparkster from Rocket Knight Adventures, all those classic games, whereas nowadays you don't really see many new mascots trying to come out. So was that sort of an inspiration for Armillo? Did you want to make a mascot game, or how did that really work?
When we started Armillo, I put together a team of about 30 advisors, and those advisors were a wide range of people. Some of them were just gamers that were friends of ours. Some of them were people at Electronic Arts that were CEOs, CFOs, general studio managers, people very high up, audio directors, other indie developers, and all these people we used throughout the process and still use to just get ideas from, inspiration, and just to help us kind of guide the path of design, marketing, and what Armillo is. So very early we played the game, had a bunch of people come over and play it, and I had Jamie Chang from Clay Entertainment who did Marco the Ninja. And Jamie's feedback was, this is kind of interesting, but an inanimate ball is not of much interest. Not these days. Maybe 20 years ago, Marble Madness was king and it was great, but you need to engage users on some other level other than just the ball and the mechanics. So he said, basically, you need a character. So we regrouped. We got together with the whole team and kicked around, what should this ball be? What kind of characters do we like? So I've got cats, so I love cats. James, at the time, had a Shiba Inu dog, which was absolutely adorable. So we wanted that in there. I kicked around the Firefox idea, and our art director at the time had 2 rabbits. He still has rabbits. So we basically threw all the stuff at Terry and went, hey, Terry, why don't you take all the stuff and mash it up? So back came about 10 drawings of potential ideas. And then we kicked those around a bit. Terry made some changes. We all put in our 2 cents. We came up with the original Armillo idea, and we all kind of decided that, yeah, an armadillo seems kind of cool because it's hard, it rolls. Yeah, sure, we'll buy that, but it's got to be cuter than an armadillo because armadillos are kind of ugly. So after he came back, Ron did the first 3D model, and then he further refined it and completely changed the eyes, and that's why we ended up there. So we never set out to make a game with a mascot. We just tried to solve the initial problem that we have, which was not a whole lot of engagement for a ball.
Very interesting. Now, Yanni, you were also saying that Armillo was originally a concept meant for phones. This is something we had talked about before going live. Can you explain how the design changed over time? How did it go from being the simple smartphone to this full-fledged game on the Wii U?
So after we got laid off from EA in 2010, James called me because me and James had worked at EA together, and I'd done a bunch of audio stuff that he was kind of digging. And he said, "Hey, I've got this idea for a mobile game, and I kind of want to start a company. And are you interested in joining?" Because James is one of those developers that really values audio and music, and I think that sort of shows in the end of Armillo. So we get together, and he shows us this game, and basically it's a disc, okay, and you rotate the disc, and you've got a ball, and the ball sort of goes down, and there's lasers you have to avoid, and there's a couple of pinball bouncers and all these things, and we looked at all that, and I think there was 3 or 4 of us at the time. Ron was there, and we're like, yeah, that's kind of cool, let's work with that. The following week, Ron comes back and he's like, hey guys, I kind of took that idea, I extracted the rails, modeled a 3D planet, here's some vegetation, here's some atmosphere, and here's what it would look like if we were to transpose this onto a 3D plane. So we all just sat back and went, holy crap, what just happened? This thing looks amazing, it looked beautiful. And pretty much we went, yeah, so this looks like a very complicated thing to do. James, is it possible to do this? And James is like, I don't know, man. This is like a 2D thing. It's got fixed vector mapping. It's pretty simple. This 3D thing is like basically, you're talking about a console game. I don't know. It looks pretty complicated. I don't know what we're going to do. So I said, okay, well, whatever. Just have a look at it and see what you can do. 3 days later, I get an email. It goes, yeah, I actually took all the assets from Ron and mapped them into a 3D sphere, and I've figured out a way how to map all the paths. Now we're just going to work in Maya and create some kind of export script so that Ron can work in there, sculpt, and export stuff. So that's how we went from a phone game to an actual 3D platformer.
Okay, now an interesting thing, some similarities I see here is, as you were saying, you mapped this to the 3D world, and you had to adapt 2D game design to 3D. And this made me think a lot of our old friend Sonic, how he used to be a great game in 2D and has been struggling a lot over the past decade for 3D. And Armillo employs this use of rails. So was that challenging to work in the 3D world? Like we see, how difficult was it to balance controlling, giving the player full control, and also making sure they're not always falling in a pit every 5 seconds?
I think that's a really good question because it sort of talks about design and progression. So the rails remove one of the dimensions, so you're only really able to move in one dimensions, like usually in a line, and that's how it starts. So that's how we teach you to basically roll and navigate. Once you get good at that, we kind of open it up, and we have some platforms that are open, but at this point you've learned how to navigate. You kind of start grasping the 3D quartered down camera perspective, and it sort of becomes easy. We don't just open it all up. The thing with game design is you need some kind of constraints to sort of balance out what your game is going to be. If you can do anything at any given time, it's not a very interesting thing. Like the things that I find interesting are problems that have constraints and how you can creatively solve those constraints and still make an interesting experience. So the fact that there's rails, I think, is really interesting, and it becomes much more easier to manage. So in terms of it being a problem, I think it was a constraint that we embraced, and it helped us develop Armillo into what it is. I think if it was an open sort of world platformer, Armillo would be a very, very different game, and I don't think it would speak to the casual audience in the way that Armillo does now.
Speaking about, we've been talking a lot about the 3D game design of it, but Armillo has those secret levels, which are 2D levels that are kind of inspired by old platforming games, such as like Castlevania, and even there's elements of the 2D Sonic games. Now, how did those get incorporated into the game? Did you plan on having some 3D and 2D levels side by side, or was that added after the fact?
So at PAX 2011, I met with the Amazon guys and some Ubisoft guys and talked to Microsoft. And one of the things that kept coming up was that the game just wasn't going to be long enough. Like we were at the point at that time, we were targeting like 2 or 3 hours, and everybody pretty much said, look, we can't sell this game unless it's like an 8-hour game. Now at the point we were kind of flirting with publishers, but we weren't really we didn't really have the whole publisher thing kind of figured out. We were just kicking the idea around. So we knew we'd have to make it longer. Now it's pretty much impossible to do any more content than Armillo already has. The moons were semi-procedurally generated art-wise, and so that gave us another 20 worlds, but that still wasn't enough. Halfway through the process, when we kind of had a cool down period of about 6 months, maybe 8 months, we weren't really sure what we were going to do with the game. James started working on a couple of mobile games. The second one that he did was a lot like the 2D stages in Armillo. And when we were kind of revisiting okay, we need X number of levels and the gameplay needs to be this long, James had the idea of, well, why don't I work on some of the 3D stuff and factor it in? And instead of some rolling object, we'll just make Armillo roll in TD and see if we can find some way to sort of break that transition from 3D to 2D and make it so that it's not awkward. Because it used to be that you would find these in a 3D world, and then immediately you would go into 2D, which kind of like broke some of the design rules. So James thought, you know what, I'll make them unlockables. I'll make you go back in the front end, which is basically 2D HUD stuff. So when you get to the 2D, it's not such an abrasive change of, okay, what happened? I was just playing in 3D, now and I'm some 2D thing. So that's how that came about. It was more about trying to merge some of the content that we had on the mobile device and sort of extend the life of Armillo.
Right. And of course, we are seeing a lot of life in Armillo with all the moons, 3D moons, 2D platformers. There's just a lot of game to be had in Armillo. And now I'm actually surprised at the price point for Armillo, given that there's so much content. Right now, it's currently at $6 here in the eShop, and I think the price is going up at $8 later on. Now, is there a reason why you picked that price point and not say maybe what the higher indies are charging? Like we're seeing the $15, $16 as being more the higher end indie games right now.
I think there's pros and cons. I think that the lower price point kind of paints us a bit in sort of a bit of a budget kind of corner, which isn't great. But also, I think what it does is it lets some of the players that don't know our studio kind of take a chance on us. I think we have a lot to prove. We're a new studio, and this is a new game, and we're just starting out our trek into the world of making video games as Fuzzy Wuzzy. So we wanted to just kind of try to be fair with the pricing. We wanted a lot of people to try Armillo, and we really weren't sure how it was going to be received. So we thought maybe it was best, not to go for the higher end of the indie games, maybe to pick something that's kind of mid-road pricing wise, and just try to sort of bring in new players that might be interested in Armillo, but make the price not be sort of the friction point in them getting into Armillo and trying it out.
The price point seems to be helping because, Armillo seems to be selling really well. When it was released, it came out with a whole slew of other eShop games, but as I like to say, the cream of the crop rises to the top, and it's been, blowing up the charts for the eShop. It's currently making a good rise in the U.S. It's #1 in some territories. I think it's #3 in Canada. With the continued success of the game, do you see, adding additional content to the game? Maybe even, Armillo himself is a very marketable character. Could you see maybe doing some merchandising with him, T-shirts, plushes, things like that? Or what's kind of the 6 to 12 months from now vision for Armillo?
I think what we'd like to do, depending on how Armillo does, is we would like to add some more content to the game, and we've talked about what some of that content might be. I mean, we kicked around the idea of maybe having a local multiplayer, which I think would be really fun. We had that in the XNA build, and it was a lot of fun. But all this stuff takes time, and plushies. I mean, obviously we'd love to have plushies, but all that stuff takes a lot of effort to sort of put together, and some of it takes resources. Like a multiplayer isn't going to happen in a week. It's probably a couple months worth of design and testing and programming and all the audio that goes with it. So I think for us is we really need to balance our time. We need to balance sort of the work life kind of thing. We've been working really hard for the last year trying to get Armillo out, and the team health has sort of suffered a bit. So we want to make sure that we're doing all these in a healthy way. And also just to focus on the things that are the best for the Armillo fans, like what's the biggest bang for the buck that we can do. And also just keep our ears out and listen to what people are saying. Because there's people on Twitter and Miiverse that have been asking for certain things. So we're listening to the community and just trying to see, what the right move is. There's basically, look at it like this. Like, imagine if you have a task list of 100 things, okay? And you could do any of them tomorrow. And you know that within the next 3 months, you're only going to get through the 30 of those. So you really need to just decide what's the best 30 things to do and sort of focus there. So all these things are great ideas. It's just every day, every week, I reevaluate what we're doing. I sort of look at where we're at, and then we kind of plan that way.
Cool. Well, I mean, if you do decide to get into Armillo plushes, definitely count me down as a customer for that. Now, Fuzzy Wuzzy Games is definitely out of the gate with a great start. First game is Armillo. I've played it. I love it. It's a great game. Do you guys have any plans for a follow-up game, or are you still in a cooldown period and you haven't thought that far out yet?
I think with a small team like this, it's very hard to multitask to that sort of level, right? I would like to think about other platforms. I would like to think about a 3DS port, although that's going to be incredibly challenging because Unity doesn't offer that, and already our RAM size is massive. So there's things that we can do, and there's other games that we're kind of kicking around as well. But again, it's just like focus on sort of what matters most. And right now, I think what matters most is getting Armillo out there, trying to do a grassroots marketing campaign, get a street team going with Armillo, and just try to push Armillo out to every country as much as we can. And then just kind of reevaluate in 6 months and just kind of see where we're at, and then decide what sort of the smartest thing to do is. There's not a lot of resources in a small team like this, so you tend to want to do way more than you're capable of. And we learned that with Armillo. I mean, we overscoped it by about 300%. So we want to not try to do that again, because all that really just comes at the expense of team health. So I really want to try to do my best to make sure our team is healthy and happy moving forward, and not just killing ourselves.
All right, thanks for that, Yanni. Now that's all I had to ask on my behalf. Shawn, Shawn, did you have anything else on your end?
Just wanted to say, for everyone watching, if you haven't picked up the game yet, you really need to. It's a really great game. I've been following it for a while. I did a preview on it initially, and where it came from the preview to where it is now, I mean, it's definitely the best value on the eShop as far as what you get for your buck. So, just want to thank Yanni and Fuzzy Wuzzy Games for doing this. And Yanni, anything else you'd like to say?
No, I'm just really happy. There's been about 44 reviews so far. We've been out for exactly 10 days. So I want to just thank everyone who's taken the chance to play Armillo and look at our game and go to the trouble of writing a review and making videos. And you guys are really what is driving Armillo sales at this point. And you guys are the reason why we're out there. So I just want to thank you, and we love you guys, and just keep doing what you're doing. Thank you.
All right, well, thank you very much, Yanni. Thank you for your time, and for everyone watching. If you want to watch a feature of Armillo, see what my thoughts about it, you can catch it in Indie Corner, which will be around the same time this video hits our channel. So again, thanks for everyone for joining. Thanks for your time, and best of luck with Armillo.